was about a group of 7 strangers that unwittingly entangle themselves in each other's misfortune. The hotel in which they faithfully crossed paths was directly on the border of California and Nevada, and it was called the Royale. The story of the 7 strangers was indeed intriguing, and I highly recommend you invest 2.5 hours into watching it because you will not be disappointed. However, this theory is not about the characters, it's about the hotel itself. The Royale was based on an actual lodge called the Cow Neva. The Cow Neva had its fair share of adversities, but it was still frequented by the who's who of Hollywood, including Marilyn Monroe, who the bulk of this conspiracy is inspired by. The lodge was constructed by a wealthy businessman by the name of Robert P. Sherman in 1926 and was instantly a hit amongst the rich and famous by the 1930s. Unfortunately, the Cow Neva suddenly burned down in 1937 for reasons unknown, but many, including myself, speculate that it was arson. But like I said, we'll never know. It only took 30 days and a force of 500 construction workers for the rebuild, and in 1960, Old Blue Eyes himself, known as Mr. Frank Sinatra, purchased the Cow Neva along with fellow Rat Pack member Dean Martin, Hank Sinicola, Paul Skinny D'Amato, remember that name, and silent partner Chicago mobster Sam Giancana. In the bad times at El Royale, upon your first introduction of the interior of the hotel, you'll see an empty lounge that was once full of grandeur. Lined on its walls were a host of framed Hollywood stars, including the Rat Pack, who treated the Cow Neva as a home away from home. A frequent visitor to the property would be none other than the blonde bombshell herself, Marilyn Monroe. It is confirmed she spent her last weekend at the Cow Neva a few days before she passed. Several accounts of her state of mind seem to mostly coincide with one another. Marilyn was described to be an emotional and physical wreck from the moment she arrived, wearing the same green dress the entire weekend. As many of you know, she had rumored affairs with the former President of the United States, John F. Kennedy, and his younger brother, U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy. Kennedys were known to frequent the Cow Neva throughout the 50s and the 60s, and JFK had an even closer relationship with Sinatra due to his future brother-in-law, Rat Pack member at the time, Peter Lawford. In fact, Sinatra saw this to be the only reason to keep Peter around, which was for his political connections. Peter came from an aristocratic family and reaped many of the benefits. He was even said to have introduced Marilyn to JFK initially, but that hasn't been confirmed. At the Cow Neva, Sinatra had specific cabins designated only for his pack and celebrities he thought of as friends. Cabin number 4 was always reserved for the men, and cabin number 3 nicknamed the girls' cabin. When the Cow Neva caught fire in 1937, one important feature that did survive were its underground catacomb-like tunnels. These were originally used to smuggle alcohol through them due to Congress's enforcement of the Prohibition Amendment. In the El Royale movie, the hotel loosely mirrored the concept and instead placed the tunnels behind the walls of the actual hotel rooms. In the movie, the front desk attendant Miles was ordered by management to film and record specific rooms of the El Royale and to mail the tapes back to Pennsylvania. In real life, while some of the tunnels connected to the closets of the rooms, specifically cabin number 3's, Frank and friends only used them to avoid paparazzi, meddling reporters, and fans. The mystery surrounding Marilyn's last weekend stay at the Cow Neva still lies fresh in the minds of enthusiasts, even over 60 years later. It was said that she was taken advantage of by mob-affiliated 13% owner of Cow Neva, Skinny D'Amato, and his associate, mob fixer Johnny Roselli. Monroe was said to have already been plastered with alcohol and her own choice of pills, and that also kick-started her accidental overdose. Now, reasons for violating her could be numerous, but one account in particular caught my attention. Sinatra's valet, George Jacobs, heard talk of an S&M mafia orgy that initiated, and it was said that they did it to teach Marilyn a lesson for bestowing her famous favors on the Kennedys. Many of us know that Marilyn famously threatened to expose the Kennedys, and it's rumored that Frank actually invited her to come to the Cow Neva that weekend so he can get her to stop talking about it. But I do believe he was only planning to have a conversation with her about it and not devise a plan to hurt her. So while it's unclear if he ever approached her about it, she did, however, confide in Skinny D'Amato and confirmed a very speculated romance that she had with one of the brothers. Years later, his friend Joe Del Rosso revealed, he said, Skinny told us way back right after Jack Kennedy died that her biggest problem was Bobby. It wasn't Jack. It was Bobby who she really fooled around with. Jack back in those days had an eye for Angie Dickinson. Now, Raymond Straight also confirmed that last claim that JFK was into Angie Dickinson. Now, to add more fuel to this fire, Ralph Roberts also said that months before her death, Marilyn called him from a party at Bing Crosby's home about her night with JFK. Marilyn told me that this night in March was the only time of her affair with JFK. A great many people thought after that weekend that there was more to it. Marilyn gave me the impression that this was not a major event for either of them. It happened once that weekend, and that was that. To go off topic a bit, that party at Bing Crosby's house was the reason Peter Lawford got kicked out of the Rat Pack by Frank Sinatra. Frank had plans for JFK to stay as a guest at his house and even installed a helipad for his landing. They say that Bobby Kennedy convinced John to pull out of the ordeal with Frank last minute because he didn't want the family associated with people who had mob ties. Frank was already not super fond of Peter and blamed it on him and never forgave him for it. He was so mad at Peter that he took a sledgehammer and destroyed the helipad. Back on topic. Sam Giancana's camp was already having shaky relations with the president as they had helped JFK steal critical votes in Illinois that would enable him to win the presidential election. He also aided the Kennedys in the plot to assassinate Cuban revolutionary Fidel Castro for $150,000 back then, which we all know was unsuccessful. Sam felt that he was double-crossed by the Kennedys, especially Bobby, who hypocritically didn't want the family involved with the underworld of organized crime. When Marilyn was assaulted in the room that fateful night, there were photos shamelessly taken with Sinatra's own camera. Now, some say it was Frank, some say it couldn't have been. A claim to help the latter rumor came from the member of the kitchen staff named Ted Steffens. He said, "All I know is this. We got a call from Peter Lawford. We need coffee in Chalet 52, he screamed into the phone, then hung up. He sounded frantic. No less than 2 minutes passed and it was Mr. Sinatra on the phone screaming, "Where's that damn coffee?" I learned later that they were in 52 walking Marilyn around, trying to get her to wake up. It is assumed that she was discovered unconscious. Tony O, who served on Frank's management team, said that Frank in fact loved Marilyn very much and that her death was something he never truly got over. I'd like to believe that Frank did find Marilyn in that state rather than participating in the act to frame her as blackmail. The person who took the photo is still unknown, but what was on the photos wasn't. Photographer William Woodfield was asked to develop them by Frank Sinatra himself. He said, "I developed the film and some of the pictures, about 9 frames, showed Marilyn on all fours. She looked sick. Astride her, either riding her like a horse or trying to help her up, I couldn't make out which, was Sam Giancana. Frank asked me what I thought I should do with the pictures. I said, I'd bum them. Then he took his lighter out and burned them, and that was the end of it." In the bad times at the El Royale, there was a highly coveted film with a very important person on it having sex with someone. The movie never revealed who it was and left it to the viewer's imagination, but most speculated it was either JFK or Martin Luther King Jr. JFK because he was known to frequent the Cow Neva while he was a senator, and he was speculated to have been with a lot of women outside of his marriage. MLK was another assumed figure because of the implications of one of the characters in the movie. However, being that the movie was to take place in 1969, the front desk attendant Miles said that the incident on the film roll happened last year, which means the incident took place in 1968. JFK was already dead for 5 years, and we all know that Robert Kennedy was assassinated in 1968, as was MLK. But MLK was never a confirmed guest at the Cow Neva. Robert and his family were, and considering that Frank Sinatra lost his gambling license in 1963, selling it that year, RFK would have been able to use the lodge without interruption or worry of negative affiliations. Now, one last theory is that it could have been their father, Joseph Kennedy Sr., as he died in 1969. He was even staying at the Cow Neva when Sinatra finalized his deal in buying the place, so he wasn't a stranger to making himself a frequent guest. As art would imitate life, the film roll was thrown into fire in the final moments of the movie. As you are now aware, Sinatra burned the photo proof of Marilyn and the gangsters. One interesting fact though, somehow one picture of Marilyn did survive, and it was dispatched to columnist Dorothy Kilgallen. By the way, Dorothy is another very interesting person I'd like to research, as she had substantial information about who killed JFK and mysteriously died days before she was going to make the reveal. All in all, it's very clear that Marilyn's last weekend at the Cow Neva and the hotel itself greatly inspired the bad times at the El Royale. Thank you guys for watching. Hope you enjoyed.